How's it going again, everybody? It's Carpo once again here. It's February 23rd, 2019, and you know, I came out to make this video a few minutes ago, and after I sat here for a few minutes thinking about it, I just turned off the camera. I said, no, I'm not even going to bother. It's not the kind of subject I can cover unless I'm in the right mood. But, you know, I took a sip of wine and thought about it for a second, and decided maybe it was something that I might as well just get over with. Not in the sense of getting it over with, I guess wouldn't be the right terminology, but rather it's something that I should reluctantly cover because I find it's an important issue. And this is a video that, of course, women are welcome to watch, but it's mainly addressed to the men. I think that men in today's world, or in the Western world today, have a very difficult time adjusting to the new climate of what is expected of men. But I don't just exclusively think of this as a man problem. Women have had this problem for a long time. Women's suffrage and, even just, gaining the right to vote was one thing, but, in a lot of places women still aren't even allowed to drive or leave home without their men chaperoning them. So it's a hot button topic. And the men's rights movement, or what you might call the red pill, has brought in a lot of, let's just say there's a lot of heat on that subject, and so I've avoided it generally. But it's something I feel I have to talk about. And if you don't know, because, I was a few comments back and forth on a variety of videos, every day I'll watch a few videos here and there and leave a comment. And there was one comment by somebody that was like red pill psychology or something, or it was red pill something was the name of their channel. And I thought, well, this is a person who's pretty dedicated, to this red pill philosophy. In the comments, there was a female who had asked, what does red pill mean? And I realized a lot of people still aren't aware of this. Well, it all goes back to the idea of Morpheus and Neo during the Matrix movie, where he says you can take the blue pill, wake up, everything's fine, or take the red pill and see how deep the rabbit hole goes. And in that sense, they're relating it to the idea that if a man really looks at what's going on between men and women, that he'll find that men are the ones who have actually been put down, that men are the ones who, have all of these shortcomings and issues we have to deal with legally, repercussions such as the women always get the child, or if the women, there's a domestic disturbance, the women always, the men always gets taken away in cuffs, that kind of thing. And there is a lot of truth to it. Let me just say, before anybody gets upset or frustrated about the subject or thinks that I'm on one side or the other, I'm very neutral on this. I laugh at both feminists and men's rights advocates equally, but I also sympathize with both sides equally. That's the thing. I understand that when people get upset about things, it's because it's problems that have happened to them in their life. So, the men's rights movement is, in my opinion, separated into two categories. There are the men who just need someone to talk to, someone who's on their side, someone who they can relate to because they've had maybe a serious issue with attracting women. It may be a sexual issue, it may be a personality problem. It may be that they lost their children, their wife left them after all these years out of the blue for some other guy. A lot of things happen to people. But men, we tend to feel inferior if we, lose out, or if we're turned down, let's say, and a lot of men are turned down by women. And what I found is that there's, anyhow, a separation of older men, maybe in their 30s, who have been wronged by women, but just want to talk about it and kind of get back on track, figure out what is it about women. And then there's men who are younger men who just want to rant and rave and say women are the devil and everything that's wrong with the world, and curse and rant. There's a little bit, and I read, this isn't something that I just popped into and thought, oh, I'm just going to talk about. This is something I've been reading about for months, and I've read a lot of forums and Reddit posts from people like this, and realized that most people mean well, and it's kind of a way for a lot of guys to vent. So a lot of guys don't mean what they're saying, but at the same time a lot of guys do. So one of the things I'd like to talk about first about this issue is that first of all, there's a lot of talk about alpha males, alpha and beta. first off, alpha males don't go out complaining about the way women are. And this is, a lot of these are my opinions, so don't be offended by this, but if you're truly an alpha male, it means that you've learned to not just relate to your fellow man, but relate to women as well. In other words, women aren't going to change just because men are angry about their rejection. Men have to understand that there's more to it. And so a lot of guys, they do that. They go out and they play the game. And a lot of the red pill psychology is about teaching men how to date and how to get in women's pants and this kind of stuff. And I hate to say that that's shallow, because sex is a huge part of evolution. It's a huge part of adaptation. Man and women, you know, that's what we do. We mate. So, but the main point I want to make here is that a true alpha is calm. It's about an attractive personality, not just a good pickup line. And I'll get more into that later, but a lot of men tend to generalize females into these categories of, you know, these seductresses that are just out to get them, and that's not always the case. I should give you my background first, because it was funny when I left a comment to one of these people on a video about something like this. He said, well, you'll understand, you know, you're young. And I was like, hey, I've been with my woman for 20 years, okay? Over 20 years. I understand what it takes to make a relationship work. And I know that men and women have a lot of differences physically and mentally. And I've come to terms with that and accept it, and it's okay. I don't get into the debate of men and women are totally equal. It's just not even worth my time. I know that we're different. We have, obviously, you know, men have testosterone. For people who say that we're not different, why would a person even take hormones? Of course we're different. Testosterone and estrogen just being one of them, but our demeanors and the way that we handle things are different. And so some men really can't handle the way that women are. Regardless of whether the women are total bitches or... There's another side to this, okay? A lot of men, and I hate to say this because a lot of these guys get themselves into this because they're seeking out trophy girls. They're looking for this hot chick. And I know this because I have had friends throughout my life that are really intelligent, good-looking guys who, you know, the first thing they do is show me a picture of their new girlfriend instead of telling me about her. And that's what most guys do. Oh, look at her, isn't she hot? Check her out, check these pictures I got, you know. And so for me, I'm kind of a different guy in the sense that that doesn't move me. I don't get turned on by like, right on, man, yeah, your chick's hot. I want to know, is this the kind of woman you could spend years with? Is this somebody you could actually compromise with? Because I've seen where that road leads. A lot of guys are looking for hot chicks and don't give a shit about their personality, and then they end up with this complete bitch that treats them like shit, and they continue to tolerate it for good sex. I mean, I just never understood that. But to each his own. But you can't blame the woman if the man is the one who's also seeking kind of that, you know, to use each other. And there's the whole sexual side to that within, you know, the sexual community, you know, the Tinder community, if you will. Call me old-fashioned, but, you know, monogamy to me is something special. It's something that if you don't want to maintain it, then don't. If you want to go out and be a free spirit and fuck everybody, fine, so be it. But in the end, it comes back to bite everybody in the ass. You don't see elderly swingers out there. You see elderly couples that are holding each other's hands and walking on the beach, because that's what really matters later in life. So if you want to play it fast and hard, no pun intended, and you want to live the fast-paced life, so go out and date and fuck everybody you can meet. But in the end, you will end up, most people end up saying, well, I just want one person that can understand me. And whether that be a male and a male, or a male and female, or female and female, or whatever it might be, a freaking manatee and eagle, you know, the way things are going today with all the different pronouns and shit, you know, it's just, it's another aspect of it, living into the sensitive, you know, realm that we live in, where everything has to be PC. I say fuck PC culture. I honestly kind of, for a minute, said maybe we should watch our language, and I said no. First, you know, freedom of speech should outweigh everything, because of the fact that if you start to suppress what people can say, then they will always rebel. So it's funny because a lot of these men's rights groups are seeking male approval from one another, but like I said, you have to seek female approval as well, regardless of how you feel that women should be. But you know, women aren't protected here. I'm not sitting here bashing men's rights movement. I want you to know that. I have feminist, feminism is so toxic today. There are some feminist groups that I've seen them confronting men's rights movements. Let's say there was one, actually a movie on Netflix. It was called The Red Pill, I think, if I'm not mistaken, or it had the red pill in the title. And it was this woman who had set out to expose the men's rights movement as a bunch of whiny little men who just want to complain about women. And by the end, she was in support of their plight and understood them. And she had a lot of hate for that. But regardless of how you feel about the whole thing, there was a point during the movie where the men's rights movement was having a get-together and a speech at some public square. And feminist groups came and, started rallying against them. And there's this one girl, I think her name's Red. Yeah, that one stuck out. Her name was Red. And she had red hair, and she was like this spokeswoman for feminism. All I can say is, if Red's out there, she's probably one of the most toxic people that I've ever seen speak. I mean, the way that the demeanor and the cynicism and the sarcasm and the condescending nature with which she talked to these guys was just... It reminded me of the way that men used to talk to women. And a lot of these guys just kept their cool and their composure. And I thought, this is the problem. Feminists do the same thing. They exploit their bias in the extreme cases in order to make men look bad because of their own situations. Regardless of whether they were raped or somebody they know was harmed by a man or men treated them badly in the past. I'm going to put it this way. There are a lot of fucking asshole men out there who deserve to have their asses beaten hard. I mean, seriously, deserve to be beaten to a pulp, if not completely eliminated from the face of the earth, because of the way that they treat females. Women are often defenseless and frail, and this isn't always the case. I understand that they're protected in a lot of cases, but the reason why cops tend to take men away is pretty obvious if there's a dispute and there's a fight. Women tend to be weaker than men. The reason why this is such a surprise to men that the men always get taken away is because they don't realize this. In the past it's been different. Times are changing. So there's a whole culture out there that we don't understand. But I'd like to say about the red pill psychology, the guy who runs one of the main red pillars, his name was Morpheus, named himself after Morpheus, in the Matrix. He said something that I took note of. It said, we don't want to hate women. We want to understand women. So we can stop being so darn frustrated by them. And I let that kind of bounce around in my head. And I thought, okay, so you want to understand women. This is from the head, one of the main guys. And he says, we want to understand women so we can, stop being frustrated by them. And I thought, what causes frustration? I know people who get frustrated over the smallest things in life. Sometimes it's because they are not willing to compromise or deal with the situation. But frustration often comes from not learning your lesson and continuing to wallow in the same pity and misery. And a lot of relationships, we tend to do that for too long. And so, if you want to stop being frustrated by women, and you want to understand them, that's something I can totally get. But if you want to understand them by calling them the enemy, that's the problem. And so it's not his fault that the people who buy into this psychology... I shouldn't say that. I was going to say that as part of this video. There's no such thing as a red pill psychology. There's only a red pill mindset. And it's almost a cult-like atmosphere. And I don't mean that too offensively for most of the guys out there. I want the younger guys to know that I am on your side and I understand your plight. Look, I lost my father when I was 15. I had no fucking role models. I had no father figure. I had to kind of teach myself to grow up. And a couple of years ago when I discovered Jordan Peterson, I saw so many young males flocking around him and I said, what is this about him? I made a couple videos talking about him and saying, I understand and I agree with a lot of his points, but also there are a lot of young angry males who attach themselves to this idea of, yeah, men, take back your power. And I thought, when did men feel like they lost their power? And so I considered it a lot, and I said, Jesus, we've lost a rite of passage. There are a lot of cultures where, Shit, somewhere out in the Pacific, there's this one culture where they take these bullet ants, and they literally tie and weave each of these bullet ants' heads into a cloth, like this woven cloth piece about yay big. So there's like something like 100 of these bullet ants. Bullet ants are no fucking joke. And I believe they're bullet ants. And then they, so all their pinchers are all exposed on one side, and then they stick it on the kid's chest. And this kid has to like endure this pain. And from an outsider's view, let's just say, I just picture like, you know, some Englishmen in the 1800s going, by golly, how could they do that? You know, and just like so shocked that somebody could be so vulgar. The way that a lot of these colonizers like treated the people that they came to their lands, you know, as if they're the, you know, the vulgar ones. And you realize now, well, these were rite of passage issues for these kids. This is what made a kid feel like he was a man. It doesn't matter if it really made you a man or not. It's psychological. And that's the psychological aspect about this. You know, that men need to decide to be men. So one of the problems I've seen in these forums is a lot of these kids, and the problem with the red pill idea is that a lot of these boys lack a sense of humor. They lack insight. They're not working on the self. They're working, instead of pointing inwards, they're pointing outwards and expecting women to change, or thinking that their complaining is going to change women. And I say, if that works for you, so be it. But if you really look inside, you'll see that it's not the women that are going to change. It's going to be your perspective. And you're going to find someone, if you're willing to look a little bit closer. You know, don't look for the hot chick at the bar. You know, look for the quiet woman in the corner who just works for you. And I'll admit it, I'm lucky. I met someone in my life that is wonderful and who was attracted to me for who I am too. Who is not a money grabber or a gold digger, obviously, because I've always been poor, but that loves me for who I am and that I want to work to better myself for. And vice versa, I hope. And that's the thing. We've raised 3 wonderful boys. Well, we've raised 1 and we're working on 2 more. But to me, when I think about who I am, and I think about this idea of the alpha, I think, you know, am I an alpha? You're damn right I am. Because I'm learning about myself and I'm learning how to handle myself. I'm able to discuss things with a rational standpoint, viewpoint, understand people, have them understand me, and I have a woman who I love and respect and love and respects me. What else would an alpha want out of life? And that's what I mean. If you're going to use that term, and I use that loosely, because I know there's somebody out there, at least one person who's saying, hey, that's been disputed scientifically, there are no alpha males. I would say that for the most part, regardless of how we deny it, there are some men who have a higher stature out there, but it's the women who run the world. Just like if you look in even our closest relatives, you know, in some of the ape species and chimps and monkeys, it's the woman who runs the show. The man is the defender. And so a lot of guys are trying to understand that and say, look, we need to go back to the roots of, you know, our primal ways. You know, the woman stays at home and cooks and the man's the defender, but it just doesn't work that way. What we have to do is give each other free rein to do whatever we want. If men want to turn into wussies and women want to turn into cage fighters, so be it. And that's what we did. In my generation, we were told to embrace our feminine side. And so I did. I wore skirts when I was in high school. Like long flowing skirt, like, and went to dead shows with my hair in fucking pigtail braids. Like, you know, I didn't care. I wasn't embarrassed. I was never gay. And that's the thing. I never had any interest in men at all, actually. But I know a lot of people are, and they're curious and whatnot, but that, for me it was just about being free and knowing who I was, and not caring, and being eccentric, and I was often made fun of for that by the jocks, the tough guys, and guess what happened? They ended up having the most boring, mundane lives, and end up envying the guys who were the eccentrics that could be themselves because they never had to prove themselves to everyone else. I know who I am, but I'm still learning about myself. So Anyway, so as far as boys, you know, boys will be boys. It's true. There is a lot to be said about the idea of the whole locker room talk thing. I mean, I'd love to say, because I'm probably one of the only guys that you'll ever meet that doesn't have any porn on my computer and hasn't been to a porn site probably since I was a kid. You know, the early days of the internet. And even then, it was only once or twice, maybe looking at a couple pictures. It just didn't interest me because, and over the years, you know, I've learned to control kind of my, you know, that sexual urge, and you get older, but during that time, in the last few years, I've started hearing about this no fap movement. Fap. I'd see this all over on comments. And somebody asked me about it. I've had even emails from a couple people saying, you know, hey man, yeah, I don't know what to do. I have sexual urges and I fap a lot. And I'm like, okay, so fap is masturbation. I had to put that together. And I was like, okay, wow. Well, you know, whatever, just don't beat off. And then I started thinking, well, fuck, when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, oh my God, that was like the most exciting thing. It's that dopamine rush. It's, you know, the orgasm. Sorry to be vulgar for some people, but that's not vulgar to me. It's just natural. This is how we reproduce is through the orgasm. And masturbation is a major part of people's lives. So it really got me thinking about, and hopefully you don't have kids in the room, but you probably won't with me talking. Even though I'm usually pretty fair, I don't really talk too vulgar, and I try to be respectful, so that's probably why I mentioned that. But the thing is, boys will be boys, and sure, we need to teach boys how to be more respectful of women, but also how to be men. And so the question I guess I would pose is, what is being a man today? Are boys allowed to fight one another? That picture popped into my head of a dad breaking up two boys fighting at like a barbecue during that commercial that was such a huge deal, that Gillette commercial, where honestly I could see they made men look stupid in that commercial, and I thought, I try to avoid what's going on in the media, the politics, but somebody will be like, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Until I'm forced to like, okay, I might as well look at the story so I can at least discuss it. But making men look stupid is nothing new, and a lot of men have used this as kind of a reason why they're so upset about, you know, the way that things are going, that a lot of the shows make men look like the dumb oafy husband. But honestly, that's nothing new. It's really nothing new. Women, there's a Grateful Dead song, The Women Are Smarter, and everybody sings that one with gusto. We all know it's true. And it's not about intelligence or competition. It's a wink and a nod to say, okay, the women can help to calm a man down in his most intense moments, whereas a man can think things through in a way that can get shit done. This doesn't mean that all men or all women fit that trait. It just means that behind every good man is a great woman. And that's one of my favorite quotes, and it's true. My woman keeps me grounded. You know, I've got my head in the clouds, and I'm looking at notes, and I'm thinking about this and that, and she'll just say one sentence, and she doesn't even realize how much it affects me, or how much I think about that. But when my wife says one sentence about something that I go on and on about, it's like, well, maybe you need to do this. And I think, fuck, you're right, you know? A lot of women don't even realize how much they have to offer to men in that way. So when you are a man and your woman gives you advice, instead of being insulted by it, you take it to heart and say, yeah, I could better myself. But that's the key. Some women are trying to tear their guys down. They're not trying to better you. And a lot of men are trying to tear their women down, as if it's a competition. We're mistaking competition for a relationship. It doesn't have to be that way. So, we should be able to laugh at our own genetics, at our own differences between male and females. One of the things that we've probably inherited genetically is the fact that if a man is rejected by a woman, it's going to cause psychological turmoil. And I'm sure that goes back to our ancestors. It's obvious how much it affects a guy to be turned down. It's a major issue with a lot of guys. But don't be defeated because of that. It doesn't mean you have to try again 10 times. You catch a hint, but it doesn't mean you give up. And I know that men are sensitive inside. And if a man shows his sensitivity, other guys tend to make fun of them. And that's changing now. But what I want to say is, if you're a man out there who has had his heart broken, if women have wronged you, Don't turn against women. Don't turn to some red pill philosophy about rejecting women and, you know, being the alpha, or some guy telling you how to score with hot babes. Just think about it for a minute and say, what has been successful through evolution? Most of all, look at your elders and say, what makes them happy? If you're going to live a long, happy life, what do you see your elderly, you know, friends doing? And they're usually, like I said, walking along the beach, holding hands, looking at a sunset, understanding that life is a day-to-day thing. We're in the rat race now. You may have your trophy wife, but in 40 years, we're all going to rot. So, you know, make the best of it and find somebody that's not a soulmate, because I don't believe in that bullshit. I'll just let that one go right now. You know, the chances of you meeting your soulmate that's born in the same town and everybody ending up with, you know, we make the best of the situation we have. I think that it's even more important to realize that we create our soulmate and that we are all responsible in creating that relationship. So, don't let, a last kind of note is that don't let the alphas on TV fool you. You know, these James Bond 007 types, because they don't exist. Behind every tough guy is a facade. I think the perfect example, I'm not going to even go there, because I think that it would offend people in a completely different regard, because I'll go political. But anyway, the best bet is cooperation. A true man is defined by not just what his woman looks like, or what job he has, or how much money he has. None of that matter. What matters is what goes on behind closed doors. How do you manage your money? How do you spend your money, if you have money? How do you treat your wife in your relationship? You know, I say that because there's a big facade Hollywood's put on, but more than that, the media. The media wants to make it look like all the women are out to get men, or all the men are out to get women, and that there's always a constant battle between everyone, but there's not. Most people go on with mellow lives, and that's what's important, is that we embrace that while we're here. And so you got to have a firm grasp on yourself. I'd like to leave you with a quote that I heard earlier, and it said, there's violence under all virtue, and there's virtue under violence. The only constant is the hiding. And that was in relation to the internet, and how, you know, behind everybody who seems, it's almost like the cynicism, not a, you know, kind of like a passive-aggressive, like, behind everybody who seems to be acting virtuous, you know, there's some sort of a violent tendency. And behind everybody who's angry and violent, there's a passive reason why they do it. And when we start to see that, we realize that it's not a bunch of angry men who want to beat women. And it's not a bunch of angry feminists who want to go out and torch men. But there are a few in the groups that are like that. And I think that it's up to both groups to kind of disown and, you know, let people like that know that, hey, we're not at war with the other sex here. It's just absurd. So, I'm glad that I did this one, you know, in the end. To get it out of the way and realize that, you know, the thing is, there's a lot of guys out there who have had bad luck. I get that. But there's also a lot of guys out there who have made bad decisions for themselves and chosen a woman that they knew in their hearts wasn't the right one for them. And when she leaves them, they're surprised and they get angry at women. Well, there's a lot of women out there who had a man who may have beat them as well, and they may think that all men are out to get them. But let me say, you know, my wife is an exception to the rule as well as me, and that may sound